Well, the next step is to figure out which trial is going to go first. He's charged under a federal statute which defines as first-degree murder intentional killing of someone in order to interfere with interstate commerce. That is, to intimidate other healthcare professionals out of doing their job for fear they might be killed. That's the federal government's theory of the case. A lot of us have been very critical of the federal government for an overreach. This is a state crime. This is first-degree murder under New York law. Now, New York is also stretching it a bit. New York's first-degree murder says is murder of a judge, a police officer, a corrections officer, or a witness. How did this become first-degree murder? Well, if the murder is an act of terrorism intended to intimidate society or change the policy of the government, then it becomes first-degree murder under New York law. So both jurisdictions have a bit of an obstacle to prove their case. The feds would have to prove he intended to interfere with interstate commerce, not an easy thing to prove. The state has to prove he intended to intimidate other healthcare insurance company executives, not an easy thing to prove. But what he did in almost every state in the union is first-degree murder, meaning incarceration for the rest of his life and no possibility of parole, and in about a third of the states, the death penalty. He planned, he plotted, he followed, he waited. When the guy came by, he executed him. That is first-degree murder in all states but New York.
Is the death penalty on the table in New York? Does New York seek that?
New York State does not have a death penalty, but the feds do.
Okay.
Now, the Wall Street Journal reported over the weekend that the healthcare professional community pressured the Justice Department to indict him in the federal system so that he'd be exposed to the death penalty as a message to, who's the message to? All these crazy kids that are following him as if he were a hero. People are terrified. One of them is going to try and imitate what Mangione is alleged to have done. I say alleged to have done. We have a tape of it happening. The question is, was he of sound mind at the time?
So essentially right now there would be two different trials, a federal one and a state one. Does it matter which one goes first?
It does matter which one goes first, and I don't know which one is going to go first. It'll probably be decided either in a phone call between the two judges or by the federal judge. Typically, when you have a situation like this, the feds go first, but it would be better for the feds if they let the state go first, because if he is convicted of first-degree murder, under the state system, the feds probably will not want to go through the time and expense of a second trial.
And you mentioned that this could be a case of federal overreach, that maybe what he did should just be tried at the state level. Why do you think that is?
Why did the feds overreach? In order to please the political lobby.
Well, why do you think that it should only be a state issue?
Great question, because murder is not a federal crime unless it's committed on federal property or unless the victim is a federal official. Otherwise, the feds don't try murder cases. We have a divided system in this country. The states are responsible for public safety. Theoretically, the federal government is responsible for issues of national and federal importance, theoretically, and they're not supposed to overlap. When the feds reach down and take a state criminal case and turn it into a federal criminal case, they're violating that line that separates what the states do from what the feds do. But because they're the feds, they almost always get their way.
True. While I have you here, just want to pivot really quick to Biden deciding to commute the sentences of those 37 on death row. Those were federal cases, obviously. Have you seen anything like this? Obviously, it's common for a president to hand out pardons and to commute sentences, but 37 on death row.
No, I have not. Well, I've not seen anything like this in the federal system. Governor Mario Cuomo, Governor Andrew Cuomo's father, was an ardent opponent of the death penalty and commuted the death sentence of many people who were sentenced to death. At the time, New York State had a death penalty. And then he basically said to prosecutors, as long as I'm governor, nobody's going to be executed. Certain people, both Mario Cuomo and Joe Biden are Catholic, have certain views about the moral authority of the state to execute. Interestingly, there are 3 remaining
Yes.
on death row. So whatever the president's view is on the death penalty, there are some exceptions to it.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, Judge, thank you so much. Merry Christmas
Merry
to you
Christmas
as well.
to you. All
Thank
the best.
you.
See you next year.